Hello, Deus Ex Machina here, the man who will turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending. I'm tired of how rotten this place is. All of you scheming evil folks, all of you people with Schadenfreude, the derivation of pleasure from other people's suffering. The flaw that I've had in my life is that I've been too pure, and I've expected other people to be pure. The world is, however, not pure. So, in this video, I'm going to give you the real truth. Alright? So, we're going to talk about the dark truth, evolution, natural selection, money, sexuality, male penis size, female size of sexual attributes, breast and backside, the entire thing. Alright? So quickly, here's the truth. The stereotype that men of African genetics are more endowed is actually a narrative promoted by the pornographic industry. The actual data of African origin men versus white men only shows the African men as extremely slightly more on average. And you'd actually be surprised to understand that the world record holder for male penis size isn't even a black male. He's a white British male going by the name of Matt Barr. Okay? And so this Matt Barr fellow is white, British, Caucasian. He is larger than any black porn star and is the medically verified world record holder. The things that actually influence male penis size are the following. Genetics, the X chromosome from the mother may influence, and then further sort of hormonal and testosterone exposure during fetal development, and testosterone levels during puberty, during growth. Now, and so the data show that the African or black men are only slightly more than the whites on average, right? And then the world record holder for penis size is again a white man, not a black man. And so Matt Barr must have had interesting genetics, good hormonal or testosterone exposure during fetal development, and so on and so forth. Okay? And so I'm trying to converge on the truth and explain it to you. And so here's the following theory. Here's the life history theory. And so it's said that sub-Saharan African populations in warmer, resource variable equatorial environments with historically higher pathogen loads and mortality tended toward faster life histories, meaning earlier maturation, higher fertility, and traits linked to higher testosterone, right? And so high testosterone influences genital growth. Then the colder Eurasian climates selected for slower strategies, larger brains, delayed maturation, lower aggression and testosterone, and associated smaller averages in some traits, including male penis size. Okay? And so I can read everyone's mind. And so basically, there are brains that want to say, based on information ascertained about me, that I am small or I'm average. I'm not. I just devoted my life throughout early college to actually intellectualism, right? And so I was extremely sexually naive and inexperienced. I didn't know how to maintain my peak size. I didn't know all the stuff that went into it, and I was just naive. Okay? And so there are sure humans who grow from who basically do not grow much from their flaccid size to their peak erect size. Then there are the grower humans who do increase in size from their flaccid to their peak erect significantly, right? And so basically, what is 100% true for me as a male who is mixed with both black and white genetics is the following. I'm a grower human. When warm, my flaccid hanging size is going to maybe be about 5.5 inches, flaccid, unaroused. Okay? And then my peak, unexaggerated, bone-pressed erect length touches at least 8.5. Then my shaft growth circumference is over 6 inches around. Then my head growth circumference tends to approach over 7 inches around in terms of girth of glands or head. Okay? And so those figures in the West, in the United States, correspond to basically 99.9th percentile for being that long, which is a 8.5 bone press, and then between the 98th and the 99th percentile for shaft girth circumference of like over 6 inches around. Right, so high percentiles. Then my head girth is thick. All right, but now you get to the problem with me, which is basically in my purity, I've shown myself in naivety to the universe. And so, being an intellectual, working on technical things on the computer, I would play soccer sometimes, I tried to be fit. But the following is true. If your leg strength and your core strength and your cardiovascular health is imperfect, and if you're not like aroused or attracted to the woman you're having intercourse with, if your arousal level isn't high, you could be less than your true peak size. And so I figured the following out. Let's say you are exerting yourself doing intercourse, and the sort of additional blood flow demand for muscular exertion takes away from blood flow demand that is engorging your dick, right? Further, let's say when sitting down you can engorge to your peak size, but when standing up it's a little bit harder. The reason for that sitting versus standing discrepancy is the following. When standing up, gravity tends to pull the blood downwards. And so if your pelvic floor isn't very strong, blood trappage that is engorging the penis when standing up could be reduced. And so basically, you can solve that problem by improving your core strength, your leg strength, and your cardiovascular health. And then you can beat your peak size with a strong pelvic floor. Sitting down, standing up doesn't matter. Okay? And so on and so forth. And so, in early experiences in sex, with my naivety, I wasn't always at my peak 8.5 bone press, right? That's my unexaggerated peak. I'm at least 8.5 at peak, bone pressed, right? But anyway, so on and so forth. Now, and so basically, the first time I had intercourse in my life, I was very naive, didn't know what I was doing. The second time, I was a bit better, and I sort of truly engorged to my peak size when I was sitting down doing nothing, and the female could bounce on top of me in a cowgirl position, in which there's no exertion required of me. I'm sitting down, there's no gravity pulling my blood flow down when I'm standing up, right? Doesn't require a strong pelvic floor to sit down and beat your peak size. And so the woman was bouncing on me, sitting down on the couch, and she got excited, she was screaming, she was at times speechless, she stopped and had a leg shaking orgasm, and she told me after that session, when I said, "How many times did you orgasm?" her precise words were, "I don't know, like 4 times, and my legs were shaking. Two down there in positions on the floor, and then 2 up there in positions on the couch. And so by the second time I had intercourse, I understood a bit better how to do it, and the orgasm count was like 4. By another time now, this woman was 11 years older than me. She said she started bleeding, and she said the blood was not because she was on her period, and she's obviously not losing her virginity because she actually already had intercourse with me. And so she said this type of bleeding with her may occur with men that are larger or more endowed. And so again, my peak bone press direct length in completely unexaggerated terms is at least 8.5, with over 6-inch shaft girth, maybe approaching 7 girth around my head, or glands, thicker glands. And so basically, she starts bleeding, and she says that her vagina actually gets tighter as it gets deeper, and so my size must have caused some tear. Sort of near my peak size inside of her at one point, I actually heard her scream, saw her clench her ass, and she pulled away slightly from me and whipped her head around and looked at me with really wide eyes. And when I pulled out of her, an actual blob sort of came out of her vagina that was like a pink blob of blood from a tear. And so the female aroused vagina, the truth about female vagina size and depth is that when a woman is unaroused, her vagina will be like 4 inches deep. When it is actually aroused, it's going to expand to maybe 8 inches deep. Even taller or larger women, their vaginas don't really expand beyond 8 inches deep. And so the majority of a male's bone press direct length is insertable length. And so basically myself at an 8.5 peak is going to hit cervix. And so my length and then my girth around my glands or head could have been the reason for that tear or blood, and so on. I was surprised that there was bleeding, and so on. But anyway, the other thing is that other than maintaining your peak size, you must be sufficiently in control of yourself to have sensitivity control. By that I mean no premature ejaculation. And so a seasoned male porn star, for example, can stay at his peak size and go at full throttle without premature ejaculation. And so as a male becomes more sexually experienced and understands how to regulate himself, that ability becomes sort of more developed over time. I'm still young, 25. But anyway, and so I can read everyone's mind, and so on and so forth. So anyway, after my first few experiences in sex, when I realized I need to figure out this maintaining peak size thing, I decided to improve my leg strength, my core strength, and my cardiovascular health. And so my leg and core strength improves my pelvic floor, which is going to help me better be able to maintain peak size when I'm standing or exerting myself. And then in general, cardiovascular exercise and like improving core and leg strength is such that if you're exerting yourself during active sex, that exertion doesn't reduce you from your peak size. And so strong legs, strong core, exertion doesn't reduce you from your peak size. Strong legs, strong core, your pelvic floor is better. You can better maintain your peak size when you're standing up, and it helps with blood trappage when you're standing up to engorge to your peak size. And then cardiovascular health, all right, how you're having very efficient cardiovascular health, standing up, exerting yourself, the blood flow demand of supporting yourself standing or muscular exertion doesn't take away from your peak size. And so I figured it all out, and then I took standing pictures as if I were a male porn star. And so there's a real standing picture of me turned to the side, right, where I'm at roughly my full size. My barefoot height is about 6'3.5", so I'm quite tall. And so protruding 8.5 inches bone pressed while being 6'3.5", right, is not gonna look especially long for my height, right? and so on. But anyway, so it's a real picture. Anyway, and so then now, I actually did the following, where basically I also did the following, which is basically that I utilized the Grok AI assistant to converge on unexaggerated bone press direct lengths for male porn stars. And so Anton Harden is a popular black male porn star. If you ask Grok based on the Reddit frame analysis community consensus, what is Anton Harden's bone press direct length? It's going to say that Anton is really 5'7", very short and kind of skinny, and his bone press direct length is about 8.5, just like myself. And then the pornographic industry exaggerates 8.5 bone pressed to 11 inches. And so Anton's exaggerated material will say Anton Harden 11 inches. But he's 5'7" and really like an 8.5 bone pressed. He has short legs, and so his size will pop on his height, right? And they pair him with a 5'3" woman who's very, very tiny, okay? And so on. But anyway, and so that's Anton. And then now, there is now, what else? There is the following. There's also, of course, for Julio or Break. And so the Break or Julio was bigger than Anton. Many of his profiles stated his height as 6 feet tall, but people have commented that that's probably exaggerated because he doesn't appear to be much taller than his female co-stars, and is probably more like 5'10", barefoot. And so, similarly, you can ask Grok what is the unexaggerated consensus bone pressed for Break or Julio. It will actually say the following. It's going to say actually 9.5. It's going to say Anton is 8.5, Julio 9.5. Okay, unexaggerated. Now, people analyzing Julio have inspected his dick where it attaches to his body and found an odd deformation indicating some kind of pelvic detachment is there. And so people have thought that this was an intentional surgical ligament cut because suspensory ligament release is something porn stars do to enhance visible length for pornographic effect, right? And however, he also had sickle cell anemia leading to episodes of priapism causing damage, and so that damage could have caused a compromised suspensory ligament leading to a naturally occurring detachment, not the result of surgery. But you can see like an over 1 inch detachment where his dick attaches to his body, and so that detachment is often included in the estimate of him of reaching 9.5. And so during insertion, that detachment tends to compress, and so on. Anyway, in terms of girth, Julio's sickle cell anemia and priapism episodes led to swollen tissue, making him one of the thickest performers. And so his girth circumference is estimated at 6.5 to 6.75 around when not enhanced with pumping, right? Whereas myself, his thinner is only slightly over 6 inches around. But however, I have head or glans that is 7 inches around. He has head or glans that is thinner than his shaft. So anyway, and so with my standing picture, once I'd figured out how to maintain peak size when standing, improved my pelvic floor with core strength and leg strength exercises, and also did frequent 3 times a week cardiovascular exercise, I was like, cool, now I can maintain my peak size invariant of sitting down, standing up, exerting myself, not exerting myself. So there's a real standing picture where I'm at least 8.5 bone pressed at my full height standing up. And I sort of scaled it to an image of Julio kneeling, performing insertion. When he performs insertion, his pelvic detachment often compresses. And so I'm taller than him, right? But I scaled the image by the size of our heads, from back of neck to nose, and also the width of our thighs. I visibly have a slightly longer torso. In that scaled image, it's a very cute picture. In terms of length, from point of attachment of dick to body to termination of head or glands, our lengths look to be about the same. In terms of the girth, I'm obviously thinner than Julio, right? Slightly thinner. I'm slightly over 6 inches around. He's up to 6.75 around when not pumped. He has, however, smaller glands or head of the dick, whereas I have a larger glands or head of the dick that approaches 7 girth around. Anyway, so in that scaled picture, I look even comparable to Julio, even though my realistic bone press peak is at least 8.5. Sometimes under perfect conditions, it could be not 8.5, but like approach very close to 9. I'm saying I have an 8.5 bone pressed peak to make a claim that is completely true and unexaggerated. So it's safe to say my peak is an 8.5 bone pressed, but at times I could approach 9 or be nearly 9. Anyway, so in this picture with myself and Break, we look to be very similar, right? Further, not all black males are thick. Hollywood Catch, who's a black male porn star greenlighted with Blackster.com, is actually extremely thin. And so there's going to be thin black guys, thick black guys, so on and so forth. Genetics, mother's X chromosome, testosterone exposure during fetal development, so many other things. All right. Because the pornographic industry exaggerates male penis size, in the past and just have exaggerated my peak erect size to 10 inches. That is false. My peak erect size is at least 8.5 bone pressed. Anton at 8.5 and 5'7", the porn industry in exaggerated material exaggerates to 11. And so myself exaggerating my 8.5 to 10 is ultimately mild. The whole point is that everything is exaggerated. Anyway, so on and so forth. Matt Barr, a white British guy, is larger than all black porn stars. Anyway, so on. So now I'm enlightened enough to know what I'm doing, right? However, still in my naive purity, after I took my standing pictures, what happens is I fall very ill with an airborne flu-like virus that gives me actually a very high fever. And so I'm lying down in my bed with a high fever for like 5 days straight. When a male human has a actual flu-like virus and a high fever, they will have erectile dysfunction. Why? A high fever kills male sperm count, and a high fever kills male hydration level. And so the male's body and the penis is mainly water. And so if you're dehydrated with a killed sperm count because of a high fever, you'll have erectile dysfunction. If you are sick with a virus and you're congested nasally and in chest, and your body is weak and low energy, low libido, you will have erectile dysfunction. And so I was on a tight schedule. Woman was on a tight schedule, right? And so, ironically, after I've done research as to how to maintain my peak size, invariant of sitting down, standing up, invariant of exerting myself, or just sitting down doing nothing, right? And I have standing pictures to prove that I'm at my peak when standing, right? After I figure out how to maintain my peak size, I then get sick, and then I'm on a tight schedule, woman's on a tight schedule, right? And so because I want to see her, I agree to see her when I'm sick, right? And so basically what ensues is that, ironically, after I figured out how to maintain my peak size, after I got the standing picture evidence and I felt confident in myself, okay, cool, I figured out how to maintain my peak size when I'm exerting myself, when I'm standing, as opposed to when just sitting down, right? And I got fit. After all that progress, Arnie made me ill, high fever, virus, woman's on tight schedule, I'm on tight schedule. I can only see her in a certain window, I'm still sick, and I really want to see her. What ensues is that I have intercourse with her when I am horribly weak, and the high fever and virus that my body is fighting then gives me erectile dysfunction after I'd intentionally gotten fit to solve any erectile dysfunction. So anyway, and so this whole thing's just an ironic story. But anyway, so on and so forth. Now in my present state, I kind of have understood things enough to be like sexually satisfying for a woman. But anyway, so on and so forth. Anyway, in terms of maintaining peak size, avoiding premature ejaculation, and being overly sensitive, and so on. Anyway, And so I think that love needs to come back. And so I think that people can find evolutionarily who they're meant for. If a woman, and so just like male penis size will vary, female vagina size will also vary. And so the Chinese women apparently have smaller vaginas than the Western women. And I think the average bone pressed erect length of the Asian men is less than the Western men. And so evolutionarily, the Chinese people are meant for each other evolutionarily, right? By their racial genetics, smaller vagina, smaller penis. Anyway, and so on and so forth. But anyway, and so often, let's say there's a taller, larger woman with a larger backside, and then like large penis size is a good fit for her. Let's say there's a tinier petite woman with a petite backside, and it's just smaller, maybe has smaller vagina. Then smaller size could be a good fit for her. Anyway, and so I want to find evolutionarily who I'm a good fit for. Anyway, so yeah, the purity of love needs to come back. In the Christian tradition, they say that you're committing to the person you're marrying in sickness and in health. So in my naive purity, agreeing to see a woman when I'm sick, and therefore I have erectile dysfunction because my body is weak, right? The impurity of the woman, right? She could just exploit me, call me a bitch, call me a punk, or whatever, right? Because I'm naive, I think other people are going to be pure. And so because I'm pure. And so in my progression in this world, I'm realizing that I need to expect people to not be pure. Anyway, and so I think people should find evolutionarily who they're meant for. My size could be like a perfect fit for some woman out there. I don't know who. Anyway, but I'm not the largest a female could find. Right? I'm bigger than Hollywood Cash, and then I'm smaller than Brake or Julio, and then a white British guy, Matt Barr, is bigger than all black porn stars. He's the world record holder. So anyway, and so if the woman was telling me the truth, the very first time I had sex with her, right, which ended up being the second time I was having sex in my life. Previous time was with another woman, who was my first time. But anyway, she again said that her orgasm count was around 4. Twice on the floor, twice on the couch, bouncing on my full size, screaming, speechless, excited, having a leg shaking orgasm, so on. But anyway, so yeah. And so sick me was weak and had ED, and then so on and so forth. Anyway, and so the evidence of my comparability to Brake is in the scaled standing picture with myself and him, in which I just appear to be slightly thinner but similar length, and then I have a larger glans or head than he does. Anyway, so yeah, people should find evolutionarily who they're a match for, and so on. Anyway, yeah. So yeah. I will make love come back. Now, I'm not a jealous man, right? Because I know I'm not the largest, a female could find. For a relationship to last, it needs to be meta or above sexuality. It needs to have strong sort of emotional grounding and strong intellectual grounding. And so Will and Ariel Durant wrote the whole sort of 11 novel sort of a set of books called The Story of Civilization. They were married their whole life. They died within weeks of each other at the same hospital. That emotional and intellectual connection is what leads to a lasting relationship. Some guy I met said he married the best ass he'd ever seen. And then he said that later on that it turned out to not last very long because she was crazy. Right? And so selecting for purely lust-based attributes doesn't lead anyone anywhere. Right? And so I'm not going to be the largest dick a woman could put inside of her vagina, right? My peak is at least 8.5 bone pressed, over 6-inch shaft girth, approaching 7-inch head girth, right? Julio would have a 9.5 peak, potentially, however, that peak includes a pelvic detachment that tended to compress during insertion. So the lengths with myself and Julio in the picture I scaled roughly perfectly with him and myself, our lengths look comparable, but then I look to be slightly thinner. Anyway, But then Julia was bigger than me, right? And so Julia's fucked a bunch of white girls. Abby Love, who's 5'6", Charity Crawford, who's taller but skinny, Jay Summers, Valentina Nappi, right? And so, if a woman just wants to put something big inside their vagina, I'm not going to be the largest they could find, right? And so I'm looking for a strong emotional and intellectual connection with a woman that would be somewhat profound, right? And my size will be big, but not the biggest. And frankly, I'm open to an open relationship where if there's profundity in terms of intellectual and emotional connection, but she wants slightly larger size than myself, then she could have intercourse with a man who has slightly larger size, that is just a larger sized man that she has sex with, but is not like, actually in a relationship with, just as like a sort of sexual side thing and so on or whatever. And then she's in a relationship with me. This is somewhat describing a cuck relationship, where basically there's an emotional or intellectual connection and you guys do stuff together, but then she may want slightly more size, and then there's some other guy on the side who she has sex with for size, but is not actually in any kind of deep relationship with. Frankly, if a woman wants size, then she could have sex with a dildo that is inanimate and not connected to a person, and so on. Similarly, there's men who can select for women who have large back size or large breasts or are pretty. And so I've had intercourse with a woman with relatively flat breasts but a very large backside, a predominantly white woman, right? But she's not the largest backside I could ever have sex with. I matched on Tinder, ironically, with a black woman, and the distance that her backside protruded from her body was even greater than this Caucasian woman I've been with, who is very big, but not as big as the protrusion of this black woman in terms of how large her backside protrudes from her body. Anyway, and so it's funny. It's like if you thought her ass was big, then there's this black woman who is even larger, right? It's just kind of like, okay, if you thought my 8.5 BPL peak was big, there's a black guy who's a 9.5 BPL at peak, like Julio, but that peak was potentially with a pelvic detachment. And if I thought that my partner was large, then there is of African origin woman who is protruding even larger from her body in terms of size of backside. So anyway, and so I think people should find evolutionarily who they're meant for, and I want to make love come back. Anyway, so yeah, so I'm not average. There's a picture to prove it, but in my naivety, I sort of, exposed myself to a woman in a time of weakness when I was very sick, with a high fever and virus, and therefore having AD. And then moments before that, I had worked on, again, core strength, leg strength, for a strong pelvic floor to maintain peak size when standing. I'd worked on my cardio to maintain my peak size invariant of exerting myself during intercourse. And I have the standing pictures to prove it. And so then I get sick. Then I revert to having erectile dysfunction because I'm very ill. Right? Anyway, so fate loves irony. And then if you're pure, you're gonna commit to your partner in sickness and in health, and so on. That's the Christian marriage tradition. Anyway, so yeah, this has quickly been the truth to basically. This has been the truth to a very high degree, and so I've tried very hard to only make true statements in this video. So there you have it. So I want to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending, because everything's gone bonkers, and so on. But anyway, so yeah, Deus Ex Machina out.